Tammy Sytch has pled no contest to DUI manslaughter. Now, I don't think I need to go into the specifics of what happened. I mean, do you know everything, don't you, essentially?
Of course, leading up to it, yes.
Yeah.
I was unaware of the plea deal though on Thursday till you mentioned it. I've been on the go this weekend, and I'm sorry. Go ahead with the question.
No, that's pretty much it. So I was just going to fill in the blanks as far as, for those who don't know, and I'm sure most of you do, is that Tammy Sytch last year was, 3 times over the legal drink drive limit when she ploughed into the back of a stationary car with a 75-year-old man and killed him. Now, the question I suppose really is how much time do you expect her to get? We don't have that information yet. And was it always going to end like this with Tammy?
Yeah, well, yeah, based off of what was going on, my understanding, and again, I've not spoken to anybody inside on the case, but my understanding is that this had happened multiple times prior. That in America, I'm sure the same in England. If you've got a whole bunch of priors leading into something, and something like that happens, that's going to become relative to the case. So shame on the powers that be in New Jersey that kept giving her the smack on the wrist and out, because maybe if she had been given a good whack that first time, maybe it wouldn't have happened, and this gentleman would still be alive. Look, it's no secret I'm friends with Tammy, and so I don't want to sound like I'm attacking her, and I don't want to sound like I'm giving her kid glove treatment either. Everybody knows I pretty much shoot on the square on stuff. Not long before that, few days, 2 maybe, Francine and I were in WrestleCon, and she was texting back and forth with Tammy between fans, and and I said, she's gonna, like, horrible thing to say, but I said, she's gonna end up killing somebody. And in your wildest dreams, thinking like that's like such an impossibility, but just hopefully like give her a little smack to the head and like wake up, And she held her phone up, and the reply was, Franny just said that to her, and the reply was, I'll never let that happen. And then this happens. Again, I think shame on the powers that be in New Jersey that gave her these kid gloves treatment for whatever reason. I think it's a horrible thing. I mean, for anybody to kill somebody else, that would do me in. And thank God, with all the matches we travel, that it hasn't happened. I'm shocked that it hasn't happened more often with boys in the business. That said, over the limit, and you run up the back end of somebody's car. Again, my scant understanding of the case is that the day or two after, Tammy was online cussing it out with fans that were criticizing her for this. That will become relative in the case. Sounds to me like she's gotten a good attorney, that the only way to avoid a long prison stretch in such a case, again, not an attorney, but just trying to think this thing and having spent a lot of time watching cases of other kinds and similar, throw yourself on the sword in the mercy of the court, and you may get, a little less in treatment. But rest assured, the prosecution, whether during the case or during the punishment phase, is going to bring this jousting with fans and saying some pretty acerbic things to the fans in the process. It sounds like she got and listened to the advice of a good attorney to just plead no contest. You admitting that it happened. No contest in America is not pleading guilty to the facts of the case, just not arguing the facts of the case.
So it's accepting the punishment of the court. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And because of that, I think she has a chance that she might be able to get like a 3, 4, 5, 6 year sentence with maybe time suspended for the time she's been in jail. As it were, if she would go into that courtroom, had she gone into the courtroom and fought the case and all that information came in, I think Tammy might have gotten a long stretch. She may still, I don't know, but it's, I wish her the best. And I hope more so than just in the case that she gets whatever help she needs, because if somebody had been involved in that, it is such a bottomless pit of black, and you can't envision any way to get out of it. I wish her the best of luck from the bottom of my heart in tackling that monster. And on the other side, the one thing about Tammy is that I've always thought is Tammy's a very intelligent girl, good looking girl, right? She's got a brain in her head, and was always seemingly empathetic at certain times. So, hopefully she'll come out and get herself get her away from whatever the demons it is she has. And, and hopefully her pleading no contest, most importantly, hopefully this can be of some semblance of closure for the family. That's the horrible part of this. So, but I'm totally unaware until you'd mentioned it.
Yeah, well, speaking of the no contest thing, I was looking this up, and the judge may actually still reject a no contest plea and then demand she either plead guilty or not guilty as well, which I think if you plead it depends if it's a felony or not, which this is, so it may not really make any difference. But it's more accountability if you say guilty rather than no contest. But also, if the family choose to go to civil court and then sue her after the fact, then they can use that guilty plea in their argument, essentially.
Yeah. Couple points to make there. The American Constitution says no double jeopardy, so you can't be charged criminally for something twice. So had she gone to court and fought it, and the jury said not guilty, the family can still take her back to court civilly. And in my experience of watching a lot of cases over the years, if there's first of all, the threshold is much lower than guilty for a felony. You just have to prove that that there's some kind of crime happened at the same time that their loved one was injured in the process. So they'll probably be victorious there. And that becomes a whole ball of wax on its own. But civilly is different so it doesn't apply in the Constitution to the double jeopardy. You just can't be tried for the same thing criminally twice in America.
We got rid of double jeopardy in the early 2000s. Would you?
Is that right?
Yeah, it was because of the not the advent of DNA, because that testing, because that came actually in the mid 80s, I think. Mm-hmm. But going back, cold cases, retesting DNA, and that's why we got rid of double jeopardy in the I want to say 2000s, but I can't remember the specific.
Interesting.
Case.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of that here too, and we've also seen a lot more the other way, right? Somebody spends 30 years in prison, and the DNA exonerates them. So I'm guessing without getting on a political soapbox, in America we're seeing where things, even though you can't be tried criminally twice by the Constitution, we're seeing the advent of that starting to happen because then the federal government will come in and say, well, this was a hate crime or something else. And so you're back in front of a jury again, criminally. So it's not as ironclad as it used to be. But, there's also, again, being a voracious reader of history, there are Harry Connick Jr.'s dad was the prosecutor in New Orleans Parish, which is in Louisiana. And after he had died, a lot of this evidence started coming out with the DNA and everything else. And they started digging into it, and they found that there were, I think, I may be wrong on the numbers, but I think it was something like 26 black men that had been put on death row that they knew were innocent. And as an advocate of the death penalty, when I hear that, it makes my skin crawl to think that if we ever put one innocent person to death. So I've got a lot of reservations about it. If somebody's guilty and it's proof positive guilty of it, I'm fine with them being put to death. But as we've seen over the last 10, 20, 30 years, there's a lot of these people that spent decades in jail or been put to death, and we're finding out now they're innocent, and I that's abhorrent to me.
I know we're both getting our soapbox here. There was a very, very famous story that's only really ended a couple of weeks ago here. A fella in Manchester Crown Court, in fact, was found not guilty of a crime that he definitely didn't commit through DNA evidence. It was a sexual assault case, and he was only meant to serve something like 8 years. He refused to say that he did the crime because he didn't do the crime. He ended up spending 19 until finally the DNA was exonerated him, despite the fact that he really could have been out as early as 2003. Now, here's the real kick in the teeth, is that the government in this country can... the number's like 20-25%. Even if you're found innocent, the government can take maybe 20-25% of your compensation for basically your board and your food and your lodgings while in prison.
Boy, a double slap then,
Yeah.
right? I mean, see, I don't know how, again, we don't want to get too off on it, but I'm always fascinated learning about the other systems. Here in America, prosecutors have what's called prosecutorial discretion and immunity. So if I go after you, and if I'm a prosecutor, go after you, I know another thing is prosecutors are by law forced to give exculpatory information to the defense. So if I'm charging you and I know you weren't even in the state when this crime happened, supposedly I'm forced by law to give that to you. And we're finding out now there are a plethora of cases where decades later we find out, hey, wait a second, this was never given to these people. I don't know how people can, with a good conscience, put somebody in prison for a day, knowing that they're innocent, let alone for decades, or put them to death. How they could sleep at night. But as I'm finding out, there's an awful lot of people that can and do. But I think absurdity in your system's case, absurdities in my system's case, I think time for a look-see, an overhaul to try to fix some of this stuff.